Welcome to Inside the Doctor's Studio Retina. I'm your host, Arshad Kanani from Sierra Associates in Reno, Nevada. This is the first edition of Inside the Doctor's Studio Retina, and we'll be talking about AMD. Here I am with my first guest, Dr. Peter Kaiser. Peter, welcome and tell me about yourself.
Thank you. Well, let's start at the beginning. I grew up in New Jersey, Jersey Shore. My best job in my life was a surf lifeguard on a Jersey Shore. Nothing better than getting paid to sit on a beach and save people drowning. After New Jersey, I went to Boston, did all my training in Boston. So I went to Harvard College, Harvard Med, Mass General, and then Mass Eye and Ear. So I'm officially a Preparation H. And then I did my retina training at Bascom Palmer before joining the Cleveland Clinic, where I've been now for almost 25 years.
Wow, what got you into retina and ophthalmology?
So that's an interesting story. So I was an athlete growing up. So in college, I swam and played water polo. And I always thought I was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. So I get to medical school, and I'm doing my orthopedics rotation. And no offense to the orthopods out there, I hated it. I hated every minute of it. And it actually put me into depression because here I am my entire life thinking I'm going to be an orthopedic surgeon. And then I do my orthopedic rotation. And I go, this is horrible. And so I actually I had no idea what I was going to do. So at Harvard Med, they require you to do a 2-week elective in ophthalmology. It's a requirement. And so I show up at my assigned time at Mass Eye and Ear. And as luck would have it, the person who normally runs the ophthalmology rotation was out of town. They didn't expect a student to be showing up. So they didn't know what to do with me. So they said to me, well, the guy's not here, but you got to do these 2 weeks. So why don't you just follow Don D'Amico around for 2 weeks? And I can honestly say that changed my life, right? Watching Don do lasers, do surgeries. It was just something I never knew ophthalmology consisted of. So at the end of that rotation, I knew that not only do I want to be an ophthalmologist, I wanted to be retina. There was no question that that's what I wanted to do. So you could say that Don definitely changed my life and made me want to become a retina surgeon.
Wow, that's impressive, and Don is a pioneer.
Oh, absolutely.
And Don is amazing. So that's exciting. Tell us about your clinic. How many patients do you typically see in your normal day, and how many patients are with AMD are you seeing out of those?
Yeah, so I usually see about 70 patients a day. We used to see more when we weren't on this EMR thing, but now I get carpal tunnel if I have to see more than 70. I'd say about half or so are going to be AMD. So, we have a large number of patients who are going to require injections, et cetera. So as all of us in practice nowadays are unfortunately doing a ton of injections, it's the reality of where we live. But the injections work, and the patient's doing way better than when I first started in this business. When I first started at Cole, all we had was photodynamic therapy.
Right.
And as you know, we're just trying to prevent vision loss in those patients. We weren't really expecting much of a vision gain. So as much as we don't like these injections and patients don't like the injections, it's absolutely changed our field, especially in macular degeneration.
And no, I totally agree with you. I think they've revolutionized what we do. And if we were practicing retina before anti-VEGF, a lot of us won't be doing it because it was pretty depressing.
Oh, yeah.
And I know you're a lot in teaching too. So you have residents and fellows in your clinic?
Yeah, so I have residence fellows. I have international fellows. And that's really why I enjoy academics. To me, teaching is a big part of what I do. It's what I get enjoyment out of. Having the residents and fellows around definitely keeps you on your toes because they're asking you questions constantly, and you better know the answer. And so, to me, having them around is really what makes retina enjoyable to me. I also like it because, on an intellectual level, just being able to talk with the youngsters, the next generation, and help teach them is really exciting. One person kind of talked about it as like throwing a stone into a pond, right? So I'm the stone, and then my ripples go out to help others, far away from Cole. And thinking about that, that's kind of a cool way to think about it.
No, and you have trained some great fellows. They're well renowned. They're all around the world, and I think I'm in private practice, and I tell you that we can make a difference one patient at a time. But when you're an academic, you can make a difference for many more patients because you're training this future generation. So I have a lot of respect
Well,
for
my
you.
fellows know that. To me, the thing that I get almost the most enjoyment out is when one of my former fellows, receives a Young Investigator Award, like Rishi and Sophie did this past year, or become full professor somewhere, or when when their papers are the best paper that year. That to me is the enjoyment I get out of doing this.
No, and also very meaningful for the patients because you are they're training with the top physician, one of the top in the country, and taking that expertise around the world. So, no, I think you should be very proud of them, and Rishi and Sophie are doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about the patients.
Sure.
When you have a patient in clinic, what is the best thing you can hear a patient say about you, your clinic, your fellow, or your resident?
Well, usually the best thing about me was well, Doc, you're looking a lot younger today.
Maybe they can't see. That's
to
why.
Me, that means I need that. I don't even need an OCT. They need an injection at that point. It's really obvious. Some of the things like I have patients come to me and say, that fellow, Dr. So and so, he was amazing, and that actually makes me super happy because my fellows know that in my clinic, my patients are a family. And how you treat them matters to me. And there's only so much emotional intelligence you can teach someone, or compassion that you can teach someone. And when a fellow already has it, I know my job has become a lot easier.
Wow, so you are actually more interested in having compliments about your fellow or your resident than yourself. So
Absolutely.
That tells a lot about kind of a person you are, and it's very nice of you. That's what makes some people would like to say, well, patients should say I'm the best guy or best doctor in the world.
No.
That's what they want to hear, but you want to hear about your fellow. So that shows your commitment to teaching. So that is very exciting. Tell me, what is the least favorite thing you hear a patient say to you?
Well, the least favorite would be I have these patients with me for years nowadays, and I'm seeing them monthly, every other month, etc. And to hear about a loss in their family, or to have them come in without their spouse for the first time, and I'll say, where's so and so? And, unfortunately he passed or something happened, or they had to put him in a nursing home. That to me is super sad because these are, as I said, family members. And to see them going through something painful really affects me. And it's interesting. In patients who've lost someone, I always, maybe it's for my own benefit, I want to give them a hug after the visit. And it's something that my nurses and techs knows I like to do to the patients who've lost something. And that, to me, is the worst thing a patient can tell me.
Yeah, no, I think, I'm in the same situation where the spouse is coming for the last 10 years and one appointment they're not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm usually scared to ask because I know either they're sick or they're gone, and most of the time they're gone. So it's nice to see that you're actually, it's like a big family, and any loss in the family is, we take it seriously. So.
Well, I can remember one patient very distinctly. It was a very nice lady. And what happened was her daughter had many children, and her daughter passed away. So all of a sudden, this grandmother had to start raising very young kids. And the youngest was like 2, the oldest was about 13, 5 kids. All of a sudden, a grandmother has to raise these kids. And the thing that made me most proud was my techs, my photographers. We all got together and raised money for her to give to the children around Christmas time, so that they could have a very nice Christmas event. To me, it kind of shows the people I work with.
No, I think, and it kind of shows what kind of a person you are. You're very caring about not only about your staff and your fellows and residents, but also your patients. So let's talk about some of the treatment burdens for our patients in AMD, and what are you really excited about in terms of longer-acting agents that are coming in? And it's fun time to be in retina right now. We have so many new things and trials that are going, and it seems like most of those molecules or delivery systems tend to be working.
Yeah, I think there's several drugs coming that appear to be allowing us to get to at least 12-week intervals with good efficacy, maybe better drying. The next step, I hope, will be something like the Kodiak product, where you're maybe getting 4 to 6 months, or maybe even longer.
KSI 301.
Yeah.
Yep.
If the port delivery systems are safe and as effective as we saw in phase 2, that's very exciting because that may be 6 months or more. I think that gene therapy, and when we're talking about macular degeneration, is difficult. Until we sort of solve this idea of macular atrophy, if it is or is not involved with VEGF suppression, and if long-term VEGF suppression may actually lead to it or not, it's still an open question. I think diabetes is a much better place for gene therapy, but certainly a one and done, especially if it's just an intravitreal injection, would be super exciting, actually.
So I agree with you. I think we are part of all those trials, and from KSI 301 to PDS to ADVM 022, and it appears that patients are doing well. And obviously, we not only we have to get the efficacy and safety data long term in the trials, but also in real world we need to see how this pans out. But I think it's an exciting time for patients going away from every month to every other month injections to something longer, like 4 to 6 months, or maybe essentially one and done. I think their prospect is very exciting. And so let's go back to the patients. So now these things are going to come in, but currently, how do you keep your patients committed to your treatment plan, whether it's Q4 weeks or 8 weeks?
I think it's to get buy-in early. So I spent a lot of time with the treatment naive patients to explain what this process is, how we're going to treat it, and how important it is for us to continue to treat it. I never say macular degeneration is a curable disease. I always say, I'm going to keep treating this until we put it into remission, and we may have to treat for a very long time, if not forever. And so from the very beginning, they understand that this is not something that I could skip. This is not something that is going to disappear. And I'd almost never get the question, so why, you only told me you're going to do 3 injections, because they hear that loading dose. Because I never say that to them. I say, we're just going to treat you, and based on how you're doing, we may extend the intervals. But in general, you're going to be treated for a very, very long time.
And when they come back to you and they say, well, my vision is not improving, and my neighbor got the same injection and they saw much better, and the studies I reviewed online show that patients, a large number of patients, improve vision 3 lines or more. So how do you kind of counsel them about their disease versus what their neighbor is doing or the studies?
I think it's really just being open and honest and explaining to them that everybody's a little different. Even your 2 eyes are going to be different. I explained to them twins oftentimes have different results. Obviously, they have the same genetic background. So it's more just being honest and explaining what's going on. In terms of the news and the highlight of news, I think people understand that there's some sensationalization going on with the news. The best example of that are patients who come in and said, I saw this thing where stem cells made this patient 20/20 from, essentially blind. I go, well, do you really think that was happening? If it were, we would be giving it to everybody. And patients get that. In general, they're very educated, especially ones that are talking about study design and study trial results. They're very educated.
The patients at the Cleveland Clinic, right?
Well, maybe not, but in general.
Most of them. You guys get all the VIPs from around the world, yeah.
We get pretty smart patients.
Right.
I don't think we're as bad as, say, some of the New York City practices. They're a little worse than mine.
Or Palo Alto. Yeah. So tell me, so when patients are asking you, and they come to me a lot and say, Doc, okay, we are on this every month, every other month injection schedule. What is new coming, and what can I look forward to in 5 years? So in your opinion, and I know we touched a little bit on it earlier, what is going to be the next game changer in terms of AMD management that you are so excited that you actually tell your patients about?
Well, I think we need to temper their excitement, because certainly we don't know how many of these things are going to work in real life. And the other thing that we've learned in macular degeneration is, although we're having more durable drugs and drugs that dry better, nobody to date has actually been any better than any of the early
in terms of vision.
In terms of vision,
absolutely.
And so until we have something that actually improves vision beyond sort of, we'll call it the plateau of anti-VEGF, my promise to them is that hopefully we'll be able to get the same vision results with less injections. Now, that may change when we start talking about combination therapies, new pathways that are being looked at in clinical development. But I don't like to overpromise those patients because we simply don't know where they're going to end up.
But you given them some hope, like
Absolutely.
They come to me and ask me, and I say, maybe in 2 or 3 years we may have sustained delivery platform with
Absolutely.
port delivery system, and we are early in gene therapy, but the data is positive. So personally speaking, for me, I think the game changer will be sustained delivery. Whether it's port delivery, obviously it's a surgical procedure, so we have to be mindful about the risk and benefits. But I think sustained delivery of anti-VEGF, whether it's port delivery or gene therapy, may be the future
Hmm.
to address this problem
Yeah, I
of
agree.
vision loss in real world. So let's go
Well,
back to
but think
your
about it for a second. To me, that's actually it is a game changer, sustained delivery. But we're still not. The curve plateaus, and to
right.
me, as a researcher, I want to see that curve continue to at least go up for longer. Right now, it's plateauing maybe 6, 9 months out maximum. It's just not going up after that. And so, as a researcher, we need to come up with the pathways for this disease that allow us to keep getting better over time, hopefully, and actually cure it. We have nothing that causes CNV to actually disappear. We're
Correct.
simply getting rid of the leakage, and in fact, we're probably just changing the milieu around these CNVs, especially the type 1 CNVs, such that maybe it makes it even harder to get rid of, or if we do get rid of it, it's actually a negative thing. So all those things are areas of obviously intense research, but I try not to let patients think that far in advance for those.
Got it.
I just say, look, we're going to hopefully keep you where you are, but with less injections.
I think, and that's the way to do it. And I tell them about diabetes. I say people used to have insulin; they had to take multiple times a day. Then we went to longer acting insulin, and then now people have insulin pumps, and you're looking at transplants. So I think I kind of update them, but again, I tell them that if you don't come and go blind, we cannot reverse that. So currently, we're going to treat you with whatever we have and look for agents. And I know you mentioned about alternate pathways, Ang2 blockade with Tie2 activation. Faricimab trials are ongoing. Lucerne and Tenaya studies, as well as OPT 302 with VEGF-C and inhibition. Phase 2 data was
Sure.
positive.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right. We have not been able to, beat anti-VEGF at this point, but maybe in the future. But looking at the current practice environment, you have, brolucizumab that was recently approved, and we are still learning about efficacy and safety. FDA is reviewing the data for abicipar. What are your thoughts on brolucizumab and abicipar in 30 seconds here?
Well, I think both drugs appear to obviously have similar efficacy as our previous generations, and both drugs have longer durability, anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks. The interesting thing about both drugs is they appear to actually dry the retina better than their reference drug they were both tested against. In abicapar's case, there were issues of inflammation that were seen. They've changed the formulation in that they've removed some of the host cell impurities, and the second generation was tested in a subsequent study with a dramatically lower inflammation rate. So they've improved it. In terms of brolucizumab, we saw inflammation in the clinical studies. We're seeing inflammations now in post-marketing surveillance, and the question really comes down to how big of a problem is this? What is the rate? And are there any commonalities to it? And this is something both Allergan and Novartis are looking very closely at. I don't think either one are trying to brush this under the rug. They're being very transparent because the drugs appear to be better if we can understand sort of the safety around them.
No, I agree with you. I think they've been very transparent about it, and I think it's a matter of risk benefits, right? I mean, you have to tell the patient up front the risk of inflammation, but also the benefit of going longer. There are patients who cannot come in every 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and there may be patients who are willing to take the risk of inflammation or decreasing number of visits. So I think,
and that's definitely true with brolucizumab in clinical practice, right? So I haven't used, obviously, abicipar outside of a clinical study, but in terms of brolucizumab, we're treating patients who are most difficult to treat. These are patients who are on, like, say, monthly Eylea, and they're still leaking or even getting worse on that type of treatment and do really well with brolucizumab. And again, as you just said, safety is obviously a big concern for anybody doing medicine. So this is something that we have to get our arms around.
No, yeah, and I've been lucky to use it in a large number of patients so far, and I've not seen any inflammation. But I'm watching out, and I'm telling
Sure.
the patients. So I mean, just like anything else, and since the drug has only been available for last 4 or 5 months, there's still a lot more learning to do.
A lot to learn on it.
So let's go back to yourself. If you were not an ophthalmologist or a retinal specialist, what profession would you like to attempt, and what profession you could never see yourself doing?
Well, nowadays, if I were to quit ophthalmology tomorrow, I would like to be a professional photographer. I think to me that would be very interesting. I certainly wouldn't make any money at it, but it's a money losing situation for me because I constantly buy new lenses and new camera backs, etc. However, I really enjoy it, so that's what I would do now. What can I not do? It's sort of like what I tell my kids. I go, look, you can do anything in life that you want as long as you put your mind to it and work hard at it. And there's not really a job I wouldn't want to do, quite frankly. I probably wouldn't want to clean sewer pipes or anything like that. but overall, not really.
Okay. Couple last questions, two questions. Number one, what's your favorite retina-related word?
Retina-related word. Well, because it's one of the most important spots in the eye, I like foveola. Kind of sounds cool. Like that word.
Oh, great. And then last question for you. When you retire, following the successful career that you have, what legacy do you want to be remembered for or hope that patients and colleagues say about you?
I want them to say about me that it's amazing the people that he trained and what mark he's left based on who he's trained and what they did. To me, that would really be a legacy that I would be proud to have.
So that wraps it up for us. Thank you, Dr. Peter Kaiser, for your
pleasure.
time and giving us these words of wisdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With my next guest, Dr. Charles Wyckoff. Charlie, thanks for being here.
Arshad, great to be here with you.
Let's get started. Tell me about yourself.
So I grew up in California. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, a place called Stockton, and then I left for college, did college on the East Coast, and I was always going to be a basic scientist at that point. I was going to go into be sort of basic oncology sort of research. So did a PhD, not combined with medical school, did an independent PhD looking at sort of basic molecular biology stuff, actually studying how cells respond to low oxygen. So we were studying VEGF biology well before it was cool.
Oh, wow.
Back in the 90s, we were studying VEGF biology, and in particular, sort of the regulation of the transcription of VEGF by HIF-1 alpha, and was lucky to be involved in sort of some work sort of describing the hypoxic transcriptome, and then realized that I loved the basic science but wanted more. So I came back to medical school after that, and then joined medical school, and I was going to be an oncologist. It was sort of where my basic science had been before that, and I was going to be an oncologist, and then I met a couple really influential people that sort of steered my life towards ophthalmology. It's where my sort of research sort of dovetailed just as sort of the sort of VEGF revolution began, and then went into ophthalmology from there.
Well, who are those people that really inspired you?
The main guy was actually a guy named Jeff Tabin. He's not in retina. He's sort of a cornea anterior segment guy, and he's just an incredible guy that started a group called the Himalayan Cataract Project. He's done a bunch of international.
I've heard of that. Yeah.
He's done a bunch of international work. I went to Nepal with him, and he's just a really inspirational guy. And sort of he got me thinking broadly about ophthalmology. And then I did some sort of basic science research in med school in ophthalmology, and then sort of got hooked and very quickly sort of realized that retina was sort of where I wanted to be, and then came into residency down in Miami, and then had awesome mentors down there that sort of turned my sort of basic science interest a little more clinical. And so I got interested in clinical research with mentors like Phil Rosenfeld and Harry Flynn and Nina Barakal. And then from there ended up getting very interested in clinical trials. And then when I left Bascom Palmer, decided that I wanted to be in a place where I could do a lot of clinical trials, have a big patient base. And so Houston was a great fit. And
clearly you are a pioneer there, and you're pretty much involved in all the trials, and you're considered a leader in trial design. So Charlie, that's a very inspirational story. Tell us about your practice. How do you how many patients do you see on a daily basis? How many injections you do? How do you integrate research and how do you also family time? How do you balance?
Yeah, balance is super important. Definitely agree with that. In my practice, there's 12 of us now. We're retina only in Houston, and we are fortunate to have just a big patient base. Houston's a large, thriving urban area, and we have clinics in sort of multiple regions across the city. And I'm very fortunate to work with awesome doctors, awesome surgeons that are really dedicated to sort of advancing sort of the fight against blindness. And so we're really fortunate to participate in many clinical trials and help design these trials, and then get to see them through to fruition. And I'm fortunate to have physicians that want to recruit for these trials. And so we work very collaboratively to offer these opportunities to patients. And it's been exciting. You know, the 10 years I've been doing this, many of them with you, Arshad, have just been fantastic. We've seen so many things come through, really sort of continue to change sort of how we think about this space. And I think the best is yet to come.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a really exciting time, and it's always a pleasure collaborating with you on these trials and studies. So tell me, how many patients do you see? How many injections you do, and how do you balance life? Because you're traveling a lot too,
Yeah.
just like I do, and I think balance is really crucial. So
Yeah.
we need to know how Dr. Wyckoff does it.
Yeah, in my life, I've got one day a week that's surgical. So every Thursday I'm operating, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday I have clinics when I'm in town. Those are high intense clinics, lots of patients. But I'm very fortunate to have awesome staff. So, for example, I really don't do much interaction with the chart at all. I have scribes sort of continuously that really allow me to be efficient. And I really rely heavily on my sort of extended team when I'm in clinic. And I really am fortunate to have that support. And then family for me is really important. I have 3 kids. They're getting older, 15, 12, and 8 at this point.
Wow.
And that's just been a blessing and an amazing road. My wife is much smarter and more talented than I am, and she at this stage in her life is staying home, so she spends a lot of time sort of guiding the kids and working directly with them. And so every spare moment I have, I love to spend with them. I try very hard to have family dinner every night that I'm in town. Weekends are exclusively family time if I'm in town. And then I do travel a lot. The life that you lead, Arshad, is similar to mine, and many of us travel. And I enjoy those travels. It's sort of one of the common themes, I think, as a parent. It's sort of a heavy word, but guilt. If you travel a lot, you feel like you should be home. But at the same time, if you're home, you feel like, well, man, I could be out there participating in these academic sort of advancements.
Right.
And so it's important, in my perspective, at least, to do both. And I feel fortunate to be able to participate in the clinical trials and sort of the academic world. And so I love to participate in that. But at the same time, home life is really important. And so it's not a matter of doing one at the exclusion of doing the other. It's a matter of finding the right balance of both.
And I agree with you. I think balance is, and we all struggle at time with balance, but I think advice to the younger doctors or anybody listening is obviously try to balance, and it's difficult at times, but we have to.
I think in that balance, I think the key thought there for me that I try to focus on is being present. Like wherever you are, be present. When you're with your family, put the phone down. Like just focus on your family. And similarly, when you're in an academic meeting and you're in sort of sub meetings or SABs or whatever, be present. Be fully engaged and really
Right.
try to participate in the moment wherever you are. And then when you change your presence.
And I think that's how you make the most out of the time, whether you're in a meeting or with your family. So let's talk about patients. What is the best thing you can hear a patient say to you, and what is the least favorite thing that you can hear from a patient?
It's probably oversaid, but I really do try to treat my patients as I would want my family or myself to be treated. And I sort of have that conversation with my patients a lot. I probably learned the most about patient care from Harry Flynn. Harry Flynn, at least in my experience when I was training with him, was very conservative. And I've learned to be conservative over my experiences, especially surgically. There's certain things like macon detachments and central macular holes that are symptomatic where you're going to intervene. But there's many cases where it's a discussion, right? Do you intervene? Do you wait? Epiretinal membranes are the perfect example. And I'm very conservative with my patients, and I sort of express that to them in many ways. And I think the relationship with patients is it's easy to say that's enjoyable, and it is enjoyable, but it's also a frustration. I must admit, it does get frustrating to end up having to repeat the same conversation over and over, right? In a busy practice, just like yours, Arshad, when you see new patients with a PVD, right? They really want to explain all their symptoms. And a little bit of that gets to be a little bit of a grind. I mean, if I'm just fully transparent and honest, there's like a little bit of like, oh my gosh, we're having the same conversation I've had 6 times today. And I sort of, I end up, using my ancillary staff to really try to have some of those sort of basic conversations so that I can try to deploy my time on sort of the more complex and important discussions, like the discussions with a new wet AMD patient, or a post-op patient that may not be doing well, or a new surgical patient, right? The conversations that I think are going to have a long-term impact, I try to focus my time there. And on the stuff, while it's no less important from a patient perspective if they have an acute PVD, I try to prioritize my time in clinic to the patients that I think where I can get the most value over time for them.
And I think those are great points. Number one, surgery, and I agree with you. I think sometimes I tell the patients the best surgery is the one that was never done, because especially for an elective thing, as you said, if it's an elective surgery, you better have a good discussion, because yes, we're all great surgeons, but things happen that are not in our control, like infection or other issues. So I think I agree with you. I think being conservative, it's the way to go. And the patients, sometimes you're right. I mean, even we're going to talk about neovascular AMD. I mean, you tell them about the treatment, what's going to be. We don't have a cure, but sometimes you have to have that conversation every few months, because they'll come and say, is it my last injection? So moving forward, tell me about what are you most excited about, and what do you think about the prospect of long-acting agents in managing patients with neovascular AMD?
We are so fortunate in this field. There's so much that's evolving, and I felt that way for a few years. But it is interesting if you look back, like we're still doing kind of the same thing that we did 5-10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a couple new drugs, and they have been valuable, but it hasn't changed that much of the day-to-day practice. And yet we've been talking about for quite a while now, like how exciting this field is, and it is exciting. But it's interesting to think about what is exciting and then what's actually going to change clinical practice. And I think the thing that I see on the horizon that's going to truly change clinical practice is hopefully geographic atrophy. Right? There's so many shots on goal in that space, and there's some really exciting opportunities and many different horizons there, depending how far out you look. But I'm really excited about the opportunity to have treatments for this what I see as the largest unmet need in retina in this country.
So in terms of geographic atrophy, you're more about C3 inhibition, C5 inhibition, maybe anti-HTRA. So basically, for a disease that we don't have any treatment for, so for you, that's more exciting than having, let's say, gene therapy for AMD or port delivery system or other molecules for neovascular AMD.
I think there's lots of exciting things moving, but if I was forced to rank them, I think the thing that's most important right now is geographic atrophy. We have nothing for this terribly progressive disease that's been ignored for a long time. And I think it's now getting a lot of needed research. And I certainly hope that all of the active programs pan out. I hope they all work. I honestly do. I think that complement is a reasonable target, but that is yet to be validated in phase 3 studies. But we have some awesome opportunities right now ongoing, and I really hope they pan out. And if complement is a target, then of course the next step is to move earlier in the disease process. So I think that's exciting, and we'll see. Certainly sort of the treatment burden issues are real, right? The port delivery system, the gene therapies, the new pharmaceutical agents that may have longer intraocular durability are all exciting and will hopefully improve real-world outcomes because of less lapses in compliance and dosing frequency. So I think there is advantage there. But that maybe is sort of less exciting to me, truthfully, than sort of alternative targets. I like the concept of being able to go beyond just anti-VEGF monotherapy. I love the concept of manipulating the angiopoietin type 2 pathway.
Faricimab, yeah?
Yeah, faricimab is one shot on goal there, but there's others too. And then, the other sort of VEGF C and D, are the integrin pathways. I guess that's maybe the basic scientist and molecular biologist to me coming back out. I hope there are other pathways that we can validate in phase 3 trials.
I think that's a great point. So yeah, OPT 302, the phase 2 data, you saw efficacy over monthly ranibizumab. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's very exciting time in retina, and I also agree about dry AMD space is being really ignored in that sense if we don't have a good target. I mean, complement may play a role. We still don't know for sure because the phase 3 trials are ongoing. And you see these patients on a daily basis and, month after month, every 4 to 6 months, and then they suddenly drop vision and you tell them that you don't have anything to do. So I agree. I think this feels, dry AMD is like what we were before anti-VEGFs came out.
Yeah.
And if we didn't have anti-VEGF, really, I mean, this field would be very depressing. And So I think they have changed what we do, and I think it's nice to have new agents. So tell me your thoughts about brolucizumab. We have now have it available for 4 or 5 months, and then also abicipar. FDA is reviewing that data, and then the faricimab trials, as you said, VEGF-A as well as Ang-2 blockade. So tell me your thoughts about the data we have so far, and how you think that these agents will help our patients.
So my perspective is that it's always good to have more tools in the toolbox. I'm a huge fan of the more options we have to treat patients, the better, right? Because you never know what subset of patients might benefit from a given drug or a new therapeutic or a new approach. So I'm a big fan of options. I think the more options in the space, the better for patients. And how they each fit in the treatment paradigm is yet to be sort of determined, right? Brolucizumab had just recently been released on the market, and I think we're all still trying to figure out how to incorporate that into our clinical practice. It's amazing to me how many pivotal programs are ongoing with brolucizumab. I mean, there's so much clinical trial data yet to come out. We're going to learn a whole lot more about this molecule and where it might be able to fit into our treatment paradigms. Abicipar also exciting, and that's just ramping up for another phase 3 program also in DME. So we'll see. I think one of the common themes that we're seeing across many of the programs right now is inflammation, right? We're seeing that in at least 3 of the major programs ongoing right now in clinical trials, and sort of what that means in the context of anti-VEGF agents that we currently use that have proven extremely safe
Right.
commercially. Over the last decade, both ranibizumab and abicipar have proven to be incredibly safe. There was a short period where one of those medicines had a little inflammatory challenge associated maybe with a syringe batch or two, but that quickly died away. I mean, overall, those drugs are incredibly well tolerated. So I think it's challenging for any therapeutic coming into the space with a signal that might be above that to sort of find an easy place, because physicians are not used to and are not really willing to tolerate, it seems like, a substantial inflammatory risk. So how those play out, I think we're still learning as a group, because there's got to be a balance between risk and benefit. The risk may be inflammation, but if there's a benefit on dramatically changed durability or increased drying and better efficacy, then I think it's worth having that discussion.
No, I totally agree with you. I think the bar is very high now. That we have ranibizumab and aflibercept that actually work really, really well and very, very safe, as you said. So whether it's brolucizumab, abicipar, KSI 301, and all these longer-acting molecules, they're going to come into our space. Again, they have to, do better than that, whether it's safety or efficacy. And, if there are some patients, there are safety issues, we have to talk to those patients and tell them that the benefit may be you may go 2, 4, or 6 weeks longer, but there's a chance of, intraocular inflammation or safety adverse events that we have to watch out for. So I think it becomes more personalized. And I think, as you said nicely, that you have more tools in your toolbox, and each tool may have the benefit and also may have a risk, and we have to balance that. And I think that's where patient education comes into play. So if you had to think of a game changer in neovascular AMD, is it, what is it? Is it KSI? Is it abicipar? Is it faricimab? Is it brolucizumab? I mean, I know it's a tough question.
No, sure.
Personally, I'll give you my answer is sustained delivery. I think Port Delivery System, you and I are both in that trial, and you presented the data here for the PK from the latter study. And you see that I think sustained delivery could be a game changer in terms of managing these patients and keeping good efficacy and maintaining those visions. Obviously, it's a surgical procedure, so we have to balance risk and benefits, as we talked earlier. But I think it's a step towards gene therapy. I think if you have gene therapy in clinic, like ADVM-022 and RGX-314 is now going into suprachoroidal in clinic trials in the future, I think that may be the future, because you may be able to achieve those outcomes. So I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts?
I think that chronic VEGF suppression has proven to be remarkably safe, right? For a long time, there was a lot of concern, I would say, and sort of on podium level sort of negative feelings that chronic VEGF suppression may accelerate or exacerbate macular atrophy, which, if were true, would be a huge problem and a major reason to think about having second thoughts about chronic VEGF suppression with something like gene therapy. my interpretation of all that data, while it's complex, is that there's no signal there for chronic VEGF suppression to accelerate or to make macular atrophy worse. Now, that literature is incredibly complicated, and most trials that have looked at it have unfortunately reported it multiple times, doing multiple different analyses, all showing slightly different things. So it gets very complicated. But my interpretation is that it's extremely safe. And the other point I would make there is that in animal models, in non-human primates that have now used gene therapy to overexpress VEGF inhibiting proteins, have shown remarkable stability of those non-human primate eyes for years, actually, after overexpressing these proteins. So I do think that chronic VEGF suppression is safe, which is sort of the fundamental question to ask before we go to long extended durability. So having crossed that, I think I agree with you, Arshad, that sort of increased durability of agents is a major advance in the field if we can get these things to be approved. And I think the port delivery system and gene therapy are both very different approaches to the problem, and both have tremendous upside to specific patient populations. In particular, gene therapy, I mean, some of the early data from both of the programs now that have phase 1 data in humans look remarkably good. And we've seen challenges with both the programs, both from like a regulatory perspective as well as a clinical safety perspective at some level. But I think all those issues are addressable, and I'm very glad to see both of those programs moving forward. You know, I think as you pointed out, the port delivery system is going to likely have data later this year from the phase 3 program. And so that will be sort of hopefully the first shot towards really extending durability beyond what we've been doing for years, which is just this bolus injections.
No, I think that's a very good point. That I think this macular atrophy question is a really crucial one, as you mentioned, because the guest before you, their concerns were that they are still not convinced about the long-term VEGF suppression and macular atrophy risk. I mean, I think I am in the same camp as you. I feel like based on our experience in the trials, where you have patients that have gone several years now, patients who were in the ladder study that were rolled over into the portal study, and the data is still to read out, but my experience have been nothing but positive. Obviously, again, as you said, risk benefits of surgery need to pan out. So before we wrap up, I'm going to ask you two more questions. Number one is, what is your favorite retina-related word?
I think if I had to say what the moment in clinic when I sort of feel the best positive vibe with patient, it would be, this sounds silly, but it's after any surgical intervention when things look good. Like, I love being able to tell patients, you look great after surgery. Like, you're doing fantastic. And the phrase that I use with patients, my techs always make fun of me. I tell patients, when it's true, I say, look, you have the healthiest eye that I'll see all day.
Okay.
And I love being able to say that to patients when it's either a benign problem where it's just not where they're fine and they were referred in by an optometrist, or post-surgical where they heal well. Fortunately, most of the patients that all of us operate on do really well, and I love being able to have those conversations. I love that sort of feeling of like doing something for a patient that they value and notice the outcome from, and then seeing a good outcome.
And since we don't see too healthy eyes, I think when you look great, I think that's something I use
Those
too a lot.
moments
Yeah,
are just inspirational.
and then last question for you, and again, not a trick question. When you retire following your successful career, what legacy do you want to be remembered for, or hope that patients and colleagues say about you? What do you want to hear them say about Dr. Charles Wyckoff?
I don't think I'm at the stage in my career yet to even think about that.
No,
Really. The way that I would
the way you're going, man. I think you are there already, if not soon.
No.
So tell me.
No, the way I see that is, I tell my kids this all the time. I really feel strongly that you can do anything and everything in life. You just can't do it all at exactly the same time. And so there's a season for everything. And right now I love what I'm doing, and I love being involved in clinical trial development and execution and interpretation. But I don't see that season as lasting forever. And the next season on my horizon, I'm actually very passionate about international ophthalmology. And I was fortunate with Jeff Tabin, again, sort of my roots into ophthalmology. It was when I went over to Nepal and had some amazing experiences there and in India. And And I really want to actually begin to do a lot more international ophthalmology, but I don't see that truly being able to be feasible in my life until my kids are sort of out of the house, which is about a decade away from me. And so my wife and I are actually already planning for that season. And so I do look forward to continuing to evolve what I do and what I focus on. But right now, I love clinical trials, and I plan to do that for the sort of near future.
So bottom line, you're saying that people want to remember Dr. Charles Wyckoff as a guy who did a lot of things in his career to help patients.
I don't know. At the end of the day, if my family knows that I love them and my patients know that I've given them everything I possibly can and treated them like I would treat myself, I'll call that a good day.
Great. Thank you for being here, Charlie. It's a pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks, Arshad.
Doing great, Jeff. Can you tell us about yourself, a little bit about your practice and how you got into doing retina?
Sure. So I am with a group, Ophthalmic Consultants of Boston. I'm one of the co-presidents here, and I also oversee the retina service and retina research. How did I get into ophthalmology? Well, I was in the military. I was a health professions scholarship student. And one of my summer rotations, I was at basic training at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I spent a week with an ophthalmologist there. And I went to surgery with him and spent time in clinic, and I loved the interactions with patients, and I loved the surgery. I thought that it was cutting edge, that you could really help and impact patients in a meaningful way, and you could do it in a relatively quick way. So I fell in love with ophthalmology very early on. That was actually my first summer after my first year of med school.
Tell us, how many patients do you see every day and how busy your clinics are and how you handle the volume on a daily basis? Because I know we are all so busy, it's hard to accommodate new patients.
Yeah, it really is a challenge. Right now, on average, I probably see 55 to 65 patients a day. That includes study patients in between that. So I see patients 4.5 days a week. I have 1/2 OR day a week where I'll do 4 or 5 cases, and then I'll add on cases periodically in the evening. I find that we've looked at different ways to accommodate the clinic patients and the injections and the studies. And I find that for me, it's best to really incorporate all of that together. So I don't have set injection clinics, set research days. As you know, we're a very busy clinical research site, very much similar to your site. And we'll have anywhere from 5 to as many as 15 study patients in a day. And so they'll be interspersed throughout the day as well. I think go ahead.
I also do the same. I integrate research into clinic, and I agree with you completely. Trying to do research separate and clinic patient and injections, it becomes really challenging logistic-wise. So I have the same thing where I see 5, 10 to 15 study patients on top of the regular clinic.
Well, and Arshad, you've done something that I think is really key to building a strong study research program. And I know that you're the main champion of the clinical trials. And that's the case for me as well. I have 7 retina partners who are all outstanding and all very helpful with the clinical trials. But I tend to be the one to champion the enrollment, to spend most of the time speaking to patients and really take a lot of time to go over the clinical trials with them. So as you know, in the middle of your day, a study patient can easily take up anywhere from 15 to 30 to 45 minutes just for that patient talking about the clinical trials. But it's really that championing of the study, championing of the science, of the cause, that really enables sites to build these. And I have seen a number of our fellows leave the fellowship and go on the sites where they've done an outstanding job also building clinical trial teams. I think of David Eichenbaum down in Florida, David Lally, who left more recently and is in the western part of the state. David and David are doing an outstanding job building study programs in a similar manner.
No, I agree with you. I think you have to champion it, and you have to be excited and motivated about it. And when patients see that you're excited about something new and upcoming, I think they understand that you're actually doing it to advance treatment options. And I totally agree with you. I think you just have to keep that in mind, that the study patients are kind of like VIP patients who need more time. And I think the staff should understand. But at the end of the day, I think all of us champion this because we have great coordinators and great study staff. You know, without their help, it's very, very difficult. So out of those patients, Jeff, you're seeing about 50 to 60 a day. How many injections do you do on a daily basis?
Probably, actually, let me say one thing. You just said something that's absolutely key. I could not do nearly what I do if I didn't have the team that I do. I have an incredible practice director, Allison Nowak. I have an incredible lead study coordinator in Sandy Chong. And you're right, these teams enable us to do that. To go to the injections, usually I'll do on order 15 to 20 a day for AMD. Maybe there will be days where I'll do 25, and maybe the most is 30. But I'd say I probably average about 15 to 20 a day.
No, I think that's still a pretty busy clinic. So when you're talking to patients, Jeff, what is the best thing you can hear a patient say when they come to see you?
I think the most rewarding is when they talk about how grateful they are for their care, for the treatments that you've done that have enabled them to save or improve vision. And, Arshad, unfortunately, I'm old enough that I remember a time when we couldn't do anything for wet AMD, for diabetes, other than focal laser, for CRVO. And nowadays, patients come in, they're often very upset, very anxious, somewhat devastated by what their visions become, and we start treating them. And many of these patients have dramatic responses. And I think hearing how grateful they are is certainly the most rewarding.
No, I agree. I think patients are getting spoiled, because when patients say that, oh, do I have to come back every 4 or 6 weeks? I said back in the day, we had no treatment, and those patients who went blind would come in every week for injection if they could see. So I agree. I think it really is exciting time in our field that we have great treatment options for our patients. What about the future, Jeff? What are the prospects of longer acting agents and how that will change the treatment burden for our patients in clinic with AMD and other retinal vascular diseases? And how do you see what is the next game changer in our specialty?
So, as you know, we are in a really unique period that we had the anti-VEGFs. Those were huge advances. And then we had a relatively long gap where we weren't really seeing many advances. And we feel like we're on the verge now of seeing some potentially major changes. And the first one of those, I think, is drug delivery and/or gene therapy. I think we're looking at the potential to not have to dose our patients every month or every 6 or 8 weeks with drug delivery, such as the port delivery system, or with gene therapy, as we're seeing with a number of different studies right now. We have the potential to treat patients much less frequently. And I think the potential to alleviate the treatment burden for patients, for their families, for their caregivers is hard to underestimate. It will also help in very busy clinics as well, but that brings up the next advance that I hope to see, which is a treatment for non-exudative AMD or geographic atrophy. And we've got several very important studies that are ongoing, one in phase 3, several in phase 2, that hopefully will help us with dry AMD. So while we may minimize the treatment burden for wet AMD and diabetic edema and RVO, we hopefully are going to have new treatments for dry AMD. So I don't think we should immediately look at us being much less busy, because hopefully we're going to continue to be busy with new treatments.
Oh, yeah, no, I agree with you. I think people saying that, oh, well, if gene therapy works, it's essentially one and done, or port delivery, they don't have to come for 6 months or longer. You know, I tell them there's enough work out there. And of course, the dry AMD comment is great, because we don't have, this is like what wet AMD used to be a long time ago. And these patients are going blind in front of our eyes, and we really have nothing for them. And yeah, with the phase 3 and phase 2 programs that are ongoing, hopefully we first get an injectable, and then hopefully with gene therapy that you and I are involved with, you know, maybe that will also help with the dry AMD. So in terms of, you know, patients' responses, so you talk about how you really, you know, are excited to help these patients, and when they say that they're happy. What about something bad that a patient says? What kind of things is your least favorite to hear from a patient?
Well, I think it's exactly the opposite. It's the patients who you initiate treatment for, say a wet AMD patient, and they have a nice anatomic response, but there's no visual improvement. And it becomes very frustrating for the patients who were hopeful. And we always try to temper our initial enthusiasm for the treatment we're going to offer them, with the understanding that the treatment has an excellent chance of stabilizing them and a good chance of helping them improve, but that's certainly not the case for everybody. And what I feel the most disappointing is when the patients are extremely disappointed and frustrated because they haven't experienced that change. And they all have friends or family who have, right? They all know somebody who said, I'm getting these injections and I'm doing great, or these injections make it to where I can drive again. So I think, you know, you get both sides of the spectrum there.
No, I think that's a very good comment, because, yeah, I mean, we have significant number of patients who don't improve vision, but who maintain vision, and then it becomes difficult for them to stay committed. So my next question is, how do you keep patients committed to the treatment plan, whether it's an injection every month or every other month? What do you tell them initially, and what do you tell them as you continue to see them?
Yeah, that's certainly one of our biggest challenges. And I think we find that we're often negotiating with patients, right? They're, okay, Mr. Smith, we're going to see you again in 6 weeks. Well, can't it be 8? Can't it be 7? And so it's always a negotiation. And what I tell the patients is, look, we know that the closer we are to following regular therapy, regular monitoring, the closer we are to following the treatment regimens that we've seen in the phase 3 studies, the greater the likelihood of having visual gain or stability and maintaining that over time. So I remind them what it was like before we had these treatments and what patients saw. And then I review, not specifically, but in general, the real world data out there, which shows that as we decrease treatments, as we decrease monitoring, the outcomes fall off. And so I have a lot of patients, as I'm sure you do, who are well over 150 injections. They've got one good eye, and that eye is still 20/30, 20/25, and they have wet AMD or an RVO, and whenever we try to go off of that, they leak. So we've just assumed that we're going to have to maintain this, and they do outstanding. Now, admittedly, many of the RVO patients, ultimately, you can get them off. Less likely with the AMD patients.
No, I agree with you completely. I think it's kind of like a constant negotiation, as you said, because you try to go 1 or 2 weeks, and then they're fluid, then you come back, you know, a week less next time, and patients are always looking for, you know, extending the treatment interval. I have very few patients who actually would want monthly, because, you know, monthly injections are the gold standard, but most of the patients don't need them. But I have some patients, I can recall a couple of patients who still want to get monthly even though they don't have fluid after monthly injection. But yeah, most of them are negotiating with us. So that brings me back to my other question I asked. So I know you talk about gene therapy and drug delivery. What about the other biologics that are under studied or under FDA review? So we just saw brolucizumab getting FDA approval. Abicipar is with FDA. Their study showed, Q8 or Q12 week treatment. You have faricimab trials are ongoing, and then you have KSI 301. So when you look at all these programs and molecules, does one stand out to you, or it's more like, it's an incremental benefit, but for you, it's mainly the game-changing thing will be the delivery?
I think that many of these newer anti-VEGFs or combo therapies, or in faricimab's case, the bispecific antibody, these treatments offer incremental potential benefits. And I think that's certainly of value. And that benefit may be slightly better anatomic outcomes, slightly better drying. It may be slightly increased durability. And even if that durability is 1 or 2 weeks, that's of value. But I still think it's incremental. As I look at the drug delivery, as I look at gene therapy, I see the potential to have game-changing impacts there. And so I'm certainly, I very much appreciate the advances that give us incremental changes, because from a patient standpoint, if they can go from every 4 weeks or 5 weeks to every 6 or 7, that's a huge difference. But still, to us, it's incremental changes. So looking for these bigger, transformational changes in our treatment paradigms is what excites me more.
No, I agree. I think all these drugs that are on trials that are ongoing have value for the patients. And I think decreasing the number of injections, getting better visual acuity outcomes in the real world, I think that's a real challenge. So I think all of these agents will help them. But obviously, there's better than I do that every agent we use, we have to balance efficacy and safety. And I think what is going to be in the future is you tailor the needs for the patient with a specific drug, looking at the profile of safety and efficacy. So before we wrap up, tell us about what's your favorite retina-related word?
So I would say two. My actual favorite word to use with patients is stability, because many of these patients come in with bad disease, whether it's wet AMD, geographic atrophy, and I tell them, I say, look, if we can actually induce stability in your disease, if I could promise you your GA wouldn't get any worse, if we could get you to an area where your wet AMD is stable, I think you would take that in the long haul. So with patients, it's stability. I actually love the word drusenoid. No idea why. I just think it sounds cool. So those would be my two favorite words.
Great. And another couple of questions before we wrap up. Number one is, what would you be doing if you were not an ophthalmologist? I know you were in the military, but let's say Dr. Heyer didn't become an ophthalmologist. What would be something you think that you would be doing other than ophthalmology?
Oh, no question. I wanted to be a professional tennis player, and I was so close. The only thing I was lacking was talent. And I think that's really all I needed. I was a tournament tennis player through college, and I would use the same things I do in clinic, working very long hours and devoting a lot of time. I would get up at 5 a.m. I would work hard. I would train. But boy, when you get into the higher levels, it becomes quickly apparent what the difference is. So yeah, that was what I wanted to do, other than be a physician and then an ophthalmologist.
Oh boy, thank you for being so modest. We appreciate it. And then the last question before we wrap up is, when you retire and you are a successful KOL, a global KOL. You have had a successful career. You carry a really great reputation with your colleagues. And what legacy do you want to be remembered for? Hope that patients and colleagues say about you when you retire, Jeff.
Sure. I hope I've really enjoyed training fellows. I've really enjoyed working on clinical trials. I've absolutely loved taking care of patients. I hope that people feel that I took very good care of patients. I treated fellows well and trained excellent fellows to go out and continue to lead our practice. And I hope they feel that I was objective and worked hard to bring new treatments to patients, to bring new treatments to our profession, and did so objectively and fairly without trying to insert my thoughts or wishes into the process.
And I think you have already achieved all of those things. And, if somebody asks me what you think about Dr. Heyer, I will summarize exactly what you said. So
Well,
thank you, Jeff, for
very
coming
kind.
to our show. No, it's the reality, Jeff. And so thank you again for coming to our show inside the doctor studio and taking the time. And we really appreciate what you have done for our patients and teaching fellows. And I hope you continue to do this for a really long time. Thanks again, Jeff.
Truly my pleasure, Arshad. Thank you.